$10 trillion. That's not a government budget. That's not a stock market cap. That's the projected size of the global halal economy by 2028. And most of the world hasn't even noticed it's happening. The word halal means permissible in Arabic. Most people hear it and think of meat, a label on a package, a certification at a restaurant. But that's like hearing the word organic and thinking it only applies to apples. Halal today is a complete economic system, spanning food, finance, fashion, pharmaceuticals, travel, cosmetics, and logistics. It's a lifestyle economy built around 1.9 billion Muslims worldwide, and it is growing faster than almost any consumer market on the planet. This is not a niche. This is not an emerging trend. This is one of the most significant economic forces reshaping global trade right now. And we're going to break down exactly how it works, where the money flows, and why the biggest opportunities are only just beginning. Let's start with the numbers, because the numbers are extraordinary. The global halal food and beverage market alone was valued at over $2.4 trillion in 2023. Add Islamic finance, the banking and investment system built on Sharia-compliant principles, and you add another $4 trillion in assets under management globally. Then layer in halal pharmaceuticals, modest fashion, halal travel and tourism, halal cosmetics, and Islamic media. Each one of those is a multi-billion-dollar sector growing in double digits year over year. The total addressable market across all these verticals is projected to hit between $10 and $12 trillion by the end of this decade. For context, that is larger than the entire GDP of Germany and France combined. Now here's what makes this market different from any other demographic-driven economy. The Muslim population is the youngest and fastest-growing religious group on Earth. The median age of a Muslim globally is 24 years old. That means the biggest wave of Muslim consumers, the ones who will spend the most money over the next 40 years, haven't even entered the workforce yet. By 2050, the global Muslim population is expected to reach 2.8 billion people. That's roughly 1 in 3 humans on the planet. And this is not a homogeneous block. You have the Gulf states, wealthy, sophisticated, highly urban consumers. You have Southeast Asia, Indonesia, Malaysia, and Bangladesh, which together represent some of the largest Muslim populations in the world. You have Sub-Saharan Africa, where Islam is growing faster than anywhere else. And you have Muslim minorities in the West, a highly educated, high-income consumer group in Europe, North America, and Australia that is systematically underserved by existing brands. All of these consumers share a common set of purchasing requirements. They want products that are halal certified, ethically sourced, and values aligned. And right now, the market is not fully meeting that demand. That gap is where the opportunity lives. The most established pillar of the halal economy is food. And it is far more complex than a slaughter certification. Halal compliance touches the entire supply chain. The feed given to animals, the processing environment, the transportation containers, the storage facilities. Cross-contamination at any point in that chain can render a product non-compliant. This has created an enormous global certification and auditing industry. There are over 300 halal certification bodies operating across more than 100 countries. Governments from Malaysia to the UAE to Brazil have built national halal standards frameworks specifically to compete in this export market. Brazil, for example, is the world's largest exporter of halal beef and halal chicken. It processes and ships hundreds of thousands of tons annually to the Middle East, Southeast Asia, and beyond. The halal certification on Brazilian meat is not a spiritual formality. It is a hard commercial requirement for market access worth billions of dollars a year. The same dynamic is playing out in seafood, dairy, packaged foods, and increasingly in plant-based and lab-grown food products, where halal certification is an open question that the industry is actively scrambling to answer. If halal food is the most visible part of this economy, Islamic finance may be the most strategically important. Conventional banking runs on interest. In Islamic finance, charging or paying interest, called riba, is prohibited. Instead, the system uses structures like profit sharing, leasing, and joint venture contracts to generate returns without interest. This is not a fringe system. Islamic finance has over $4 trillion in global assets. It operates in more than 80 countries. The largest Islamic banks are institutions with hundreds of billions in deposits. Sovereign sukuk, Islamic bonds, are issued by governments as mainstream debt instruments. Malaysia, the UAE, Saudi Arabia, and Indonesia have deeply developed Islamic capital markets. And the sector is expanding fast. The Gulf states are actively building themselves into global Islamic finance hubs. London has positioned itself as the Western gateway for Sharia-compliant capital. Turkey has been aggressively growing its participation banking sector, with the government mandating that state-owned banks offer Islamic windows. For any investor, entrepreneur, or financial institution that wants access to Gulf capital, understanding Islamic finance is no longer optional. It is a prerequisite. Here's a sector that genuinely surprised the global fashion industry. Modest fashion, clothing designed around principles of modesty, covering the body while remaining stylish, is a market currently valued at over $300 billion globally. It is growing at roughly 5 to 6% annually. This is no longer a category dominated by traditional retailers in Muslim-majority countries. It is a global fashion movement. Dolce & Gabbana launched an abaya collection. Nike released a performance hijab. DKNY, Mango, Zara, and H&M have all built dedicated modest fashion lines or collections. And the real action is happening in direct-to-consumer brands built specifically for Muslim women. Brands like Modanisa in Turkey, which ships to over 100 countries and processes millions of orders a year, built their entire business on serving a consumer that mainstream fashion ignored. The same story is playing out in cosmetics and personal care. Muslim consumers want products that are halal certified, free from porcine derivatives and alcohol, and increasingly also want products that are vegan and cruelty-free, since those values align naturally with halal principles. Brands that position at the intersection of halal, vegan, and ethical sourcing are finding an extraordinarily receptive global audience. Travel is perhaps the most underserved vertical in the entire halal economy. Muslim travelers have very specific needs. They need to know that their hotel can provide halal food. They need prayer facilities. They need to know whether the destination is welcoming and safe for observant Muslims. During Ramadan, they need suhoor and iftar service. Some travelers require gender-segregated facilities. For the longest time, this was handled informally, word of mouth, community recommendations, trial and error. Now it is becoming a structured industry. Halal travel booking platforms, halal-friendly hotel certifications, tour operators specializing in Muslim-majority destination packages, Hajj and Umrah logistics companies handling millions of pilgrims a year, a market that in itself generates $8 to $12 billion annually for Saudi Arabia. The Organization of Islamic Cooperation has identified tourism as a key economic development pillar across its 57 member states. Countries like Malaysia, the UAE, and Turkey have invested heavily in positioning themselves as the world's leading halal travel destinations. Turkey in particular is one of the most interesting cases. It is the #1 destination globally for Muslim travelers, ahead of the UAE and Saudi Arabia. It combines Islamic heritage, halal infrastructure, world-class hospitality, and relatively affordable costs. Every major economy runs on infrastructure. The halal economy is building its own blockchain-based halal supply chain tracking, AI-powered certification auditing, halal logistics networks, specialized cold chain systems that ensure no cross-contamination from farm to shelf, dedicated Islamic fintech platforms offering Sharia-compliant payment processing, lending, and investment products. The halal economy is not just selling products. It is building the pipes. And the companies that own the infrastructure, the certification bodies, the logistics networks, the fintech rails, are positioned to capture value across every transaction in the ecosystem, regardless of which specific food brand or fashion label wins in their category. So where does this leave us? The halal economy is not a story about religion. It is a story about an underserved consumer base that numbers in the billions, has fast-growing purchasing power, and has specific, predictable requirements that most of the world's existing businesses are not built to serve. That creates opportunity at every level. For large corporations, the question is whether they adapt their supply chains and product lines to capture this market, or whether they cede it entirely to purpose-built competitors. For entrepreneurs, the white space is enormous. Halal-certified plant-based proteins, Sharia-compliant robo-advisors, modest activewear, halal-friendly short-term rental platforms, Muslim travel apps, Islamic fintech for the diaspora. Every one of these is a real business being built right now. For investors, Islamic finance instruments offer access to Gulf sovereign wealth and high net worth capital that does not flow through conventional channels. Understanding how Sukuk and Sharia-compliant equity structures work is increasingly a competitive edge. And for cities and countries, positioning as a hub for halal trade, finance, and tourism is a genuine economic development strategy. It is not charity. It is market access to 1.9 billion people and $10 trillion in annual economic activity. The halal economy does not operate loudly. It does not announce itself with flashy press releases or Silicon Valley hype cycles. It moves quietly, through supply chains and certification bodies and community trust networks, building at a pace that most of the financial media has simply not kept up with. But the numbers are undeniable. The demographics are undeniable. And the trajectory, a near vertical growth curve driven by the youngest, fastest-growing consumer population on the planet. That is undeniable too. $10 trillion. And it is just getting started. If you found this valuable, subscribe for more deep dives into economies and opportunities that the mainstream conversation is missing. And if you want to explore what the halal economy means specifically for real estate investment and citizenship by investment in Turkey, that conversation is happening in the link below.